Welcome to 303. We are working with Craig Conrad's Unstoppable Volume, Chapter 12, Lesson 12. I'm with you on page 37, and obviously I'm also in the journals with you as well. I want to point out, and if you're looking at your journals page really quickly, you'll see that we have a number of focus topics for this one. I would write down this concept of stealing from yourself. Write that down. You'll understand why it becomes significant here in a moment. One of the reasons why Mr. Conrad's volume has become so popular is that he uses what we call word pictures or metaphors to reference ideas that pretty much everybody's heard, but oftentimes they don't completely resonate. And so we'll see if the word picture here helps you to think a little bit about challenging yourself. I'm reading now on page 37, lesson 12. He calls it priceless. Homecoming. Just the thought of it brings fond memories, even for kids still in high school. From the parade, bonfire, the floats, and all the homecoming royalty to the big football game, the dance, all the festivities. It's the highlight of the school year, at least for many, right? In the fall of 2004, it looked like homecoming was about to become a disaster, especially for our football team. A few days before the big game, two of our starters got into a fight with each other. School policy meant they'd have to miss the game. During our pep assembly, another player made an obscene gesture in front of the entire school. He was benched from starting that night. It was beginning to look like our cheerleaders would end up playing the football game. We were running out of players. That Friday, I wanted all of my students, especially the football players, to understand how precious their time in high school is. I asked my class if they'd ever had anything stolen from them. Everyone raised their hand. How did that make you feel? Was my next question. I can't print what some of them said. Suffice it to say, they were more than upset. You know what's worse than having something stolen from you? I asked. It's when you steal from yourself. To illustrate this point, I had a huge math equation written on the chalkboard. The equation looked complicated, but the answer was simple: 2 hours. That's how much actual playing time occurs during the entire football season. I'm talking actual playing time, not standing around in the huddle. There was a timeline that stretched the entire length of the chalkboard. That timeline represented the 3,000 hours of practice, 2 a day, bus trips, etc., that comprised the entire football season. Below that timeline was a much shorter line, about a half an inch in length. That line represented the 2 hours of real playing time. How foolish to throw away 1 second of those precious 2 hours. At that point, I asked Scott Garrott, what are those 2 hours worth? Scott was our stud running back, defensive linebacker. He was also a back-to-back state champion wrestler as well as an all-state football player. I caught him off guard and put him under some pressure in front of the class. It's valuable? Scott stammered. The class erupted with laughter. No, it's more than valuable, I yelled. It's really valuable? Scott was searching for the correct answer. His classmates didn't help any. They were in hysterics. I asked Scott what he had stolen from him. 30 CDs and a CD player, he said. When I asked what he did about it, he told us he bought another one and more CDs. Exactly, I said. Now, what are those 2 hours worth? Why, they're priceless, Scott said. I explained to him and the entire class, you can't buy those 2 hours back at any price. Only the foolish would throw away 1 second by doing something stupid. What happened next can only be described as divine intervention. Words were coming out of my mouth, but someone else was doing the talking. If I had not been there myself, I wouldn't have believed it. Wait, I still can't believe it. In front of Scott and 23 of his classmates, I said what a pity it would have been if Scott would have done something foolish prohibiting him from playing in tonight's game because, quote, I envision you intercepting a pass with less than a minute to go. You will run it all the way in for the game-winning touchdown, I said. We will beat Rifle for the first time in 10 years. You think you would remember that for the rest of your life, Scott? I added. Absolutely, he said. What about all those fans? You think they would remember that? Once again, Scott said, absolutely. That night, the score was tied, 7-7 for most of the game. We scored the go-ahead touchdown with 2 minutes left in the game. We kicked off the Rifle. They marched unimpeded right down the field with 59 seconds left. They were on our 2-yard line. Everyone knew that they would go for 2 after they scored. They weren't playing to tie. They were going for the win. Their quarterback dropped back to pass. He threw the ball 5 yards deep in the end zone. Scott intercepted the football. His first thought was to simply take a knee in the end zone. He would get the ball on the 20-yard line, and the team could run out the clock. Instead, he told everyone after the game he thought, priceless. Scott ran the ball 105 yards for the touchdown, a school record and 1 yard short of a state record. I saw the interception, but I couldn't tell who it was. When I saw that it was number 25, Scott's number, I freaked out. We won the game 21-7. I wasn't the only one freaking out afterward. All of Scott's classmates were running around saying Conrad is going to be off the charts on Monday. The newspaper did a big article called A Priceless Prediction. The whole town knew about the Friday story. I knew I had to do something special for Scott and his classmates on Monday, and I had a plan. It would be the perfect ending to the lesson of the Friday story. Monday, I turned out all the lights in the classroom, having only candles for illumination. I was dressed as a fortune teller. I had a towel wrapped around my head with a big gold star on it and 3-inch Christmas ornaments, a moon and a star as earrings. I was waving my hands over a crystal ball as the kids walked in. I'll just pause for a moment and point out, great teachers do this, don't they? They help their students with word pictures they don't soon forget. Notice how he finishes. I knew it. I just knew it. Many of them said. Others were laughing too hard. One of them made a wise comment, and I told him to be quiet or I'd turn him into a frog. The great and magnificent Swami has a question for you, Mr. Garrett. I know it's impossible, but if it were possible, what would you sell that touchdown for? I want to be the one running the ball in for the game-winning touchdown. So how much would you sell it for? I asked Scott. Scott sat there shaking his head. The only thing he said was, that touchdown was priceless. Scott's response was the perfect answer to the lesson of the Friday story. He also realized that physical strength alone is not enough. Mentally, you have to be as tough as a brick. Now, this is an interesting word picture, and it certainly will focus in our minds this idea of the value of time. Let's just jot down in our journals really quickly an observation or two. I'll just make a few. Number one, notice how you waste time. Forget about other people. The one sitting next, oh dude, she's always wasting time. Forget about that. Concentrate on yourself for just a moment. Question, can you do better? Are you stealing from yourself without realizing it? One student once pointing out, my high school, I've been a thief, stealing from myself, wasting precious, priceless time, not realizing how priceless it was. Do you remember the Scrooge story in the Christmas Carol? The ghost of Christmas past comes to visit him. He's a little upset when he sees his past. The ghost of Christmas present comes to him and shows him what's going on right now. A few people having a party making fun of Scrooge. He's a little bit more irritated. Enough with it. But it's the third ghost. It's the ghost of the future. It's death. That shows Scrooge, without saying a word, simply his tombstone. And the minute Scrooge sees his own tombstone, with the words listed there, of a birth date and a death date, it's at the moment he realizes he's about to die, that he falls to his knees and starts begging for just one more day. One more day. And it totally changes the rest of his life, Dickens says in that classic novel. The ways in which we don't understand the value of our life while we've got it. As they often will say, life is wasted on youth. Yes. Number three, the greatest, maybe, artist, inventor of all time, Leonardo da Vinci is reported to have said, Will Durant quotes it in his classic volume, said, at the moment of death, the last thing he said was, I have wasted my days. Whoa! One of the most brilliant minds of all time comes to the end of his life and says, I didn't do enough. I didn't do enough. There was something else I should have done. Finally, let's challenge ourselves. Let's even write it in our journals as this. Let's challenge ourselves to manage our time a little bit better. To be a little more intentional in our use of our time. Why? Because time, as Mr. Conrad points out in chapter 12, is priceless. Thank you.